What happens when an unexpected encounter in the workplace sparks an unlikely romance? This is the story of a woman who, in the middle of her busy workday, was caught in an unguarded moment, sleeping at her desk. Little did she know, this simple act would catch the eye of a millionaire and change her life forever. Our story begins with a female protagonist, a hardworking and dedicated employee in a fast-paced office environment. She is the kind of person who always goes the extra mile, staying late, working through lunch, and taking on extra projects. Despite her dedication, the long hours often take a toll, and her exhaustion is evident. She pushes herself relentlessly, determined to prove her worth. Enter the millionaire CEO. He's successful, wealthy, and has everything he could ever want. He's used to being the center of attention, surrounded by people who admire him for his wealth and accomplishments. One day, he visits her company for an important business meeting, completely unaware that his life is about to change. As he walks through the office, he notices a young woman at her desk, seemingly in deep thought. Her head is resting on her arms, and she's fallen asleep, exhausted from her constant workload. This sight, something so simple yet so human, strikes him unexpectedly. In that moment, the CEO feels a connection, a sudden intrigue. For the first time, he sees something more than just a hard-working employee. He sees someone real, someone who isn't afraid to show vulnerability. This moment of vulnerability, so unlike the polished, perfect persona he is used to, captures his attention. He watches her quietly, taken aback by her dedication and the toll it takes on her. It's not the typical image he encounters daily, and something about her raw humanity, draws him in. As the days go by, the millionaire becomes more curious. He finds himself thinking about her, wanting to know more about the woman who had been caught sleeping at her desk. It's not just about her appearance or the fact that she's a hard-working employee. There's something deeper that attracts him. Her dedication to her work, her determination, and the way she balances her life with all the pressure she's under are qualities he admires. Over time, their paths cross more frequently. He starts noticing her small gestures, how she takes pride in her work, her polite but shy demeanor, and her commitment to doing her best, no matter the circumstance. These moments lead to small conversations, polite exchanges that grow into something more meaningful. Through these interactions, the CEO begins to see her in a new light, as someone who is far more than just another employee. He begins to understand that there's a person beneath all the professional layers, a person with dreams, ambitions, and a story of her own. This unexpected connection marks the beginning of something neither of them could have predicted. It was an ordinary day in the office when something extraordinary happened, and little did either of them know. It would be the beginning of an unforgettable journey. The office was buzzing with the usual hum of phones ringing, keyboards clicking, and the occasional chatter between coworkers. It was another day in the fast-paced world of business, where everyone was hustling to meet deadlines and cross off items from their long to-do lists. But for one woman, exhaustion had caught up with her. She had been working long hours for weeks. Every day seemed to blur into the next, filled with meetings, reports, emails, and endless tasks that kept piling up. Her boss constantly demanded more. Her colleagues needed assistance, and yet she never said no. The pressure weighed heavily on her, but she pushed through it with determination. She was a reliable one in the office, the one everyone could count on. But as the clock ticked past midnight on this particular day, the fatigue from all the late nights finally overcame her. The woman sat at her desk, staring at the screen, eyes heavy with exhaustion. She tried to keep her focus, tried to finish the last few tasks on her list, but her body refused to comply. It was just too much. Her eyelids grew heavy, and before she could stop herself, she laid her head down on the desk, briefly closing her eyes to rest. The soft hum of the office and the distant murmur of her co-workers' voices faded as she drifted off into a brief, yet peaceful, sleep. What she didn't realize was at this moment, this simple act of exhaustion would change everything. She had been seen. Unbeknownst to her, the office was not as quiet as she thought. The CEO, a successful and powerful millionaire, had entered the building that evening. He was in town for a high-profile meeting with key investors, and it was no surprise that his presence commanded attention. Tall, confident, and impeccably dressed, the CEO had everything he could ever want: money, power, success, but ironically, not the one thing he hadn't yet found: true connection. The meeting had gone well, and afterward, the CEO decided to take a quick walk around the office to get a feel for the work environment. He wasn't a frequent visitor, so the office was unfamiliar to him, but he thought it would be beneficial to get a closer look at the people behind the numbers. His reputation had been built on business acumen, but something about the office's atmosphere intrigued him. He wanted to see the faces of the employees, learn more about the people who helped keep everything running smoothly. As he walked through the rows of desks, he was struck by the usual office chatter, the focused workers, and the occasional glance at the clock to see how much time was left until the end of the workday. But then he stopped. His eyes were drawn to the young woman sitting at her desk. At first, he thought she was just another tired employee, working late to finish her tasks. But as he looked closer, he saw something different. She wasn't just tired. She had fallen asleep at her desk. Her face was gently resting on her arms, her eyes closed in peaceful slumber, unaware that anyone was watching. For a brief moment, the CEO stood still, watching her with a quiet intensity. There was something incredibly human about the scene. The hustle and bustle of the office had momentarily ceased for him, and in this unexpected moment, he saw not just an employee but a woman. She wasn't trying to impress anyone. She wasn't worried about looking perfect or polished. In that quiet moment, all the pressures of the workday seemed to melt away, and all that remained was the image of someone exhausted, yet determined, still working through the night to meet her goals. The CEO's thoughts were immediate and strong. This moment, so simple yet so raw, struck him deeply. He had seen many people over the years, countless employees, clients, and business partners, but this was different. This woman, the way she worked tirelessly without complaining, how she just kept pushing herself despite the exhaustion, was something he admired. And seeing her in such a vulnerable, human moment made him feel a sense of connection, something he hadn't felt in a long time. For a brief moment, the CEO thought about turning around, leaving her to her rest, and continuing his tour of the office. But something held him there. His curiosity had been piqued. Who was she? What drove her to work so relentlessly? What was her story? In that brief moment, he realized he wanted to know more, and perhaps there was more to her than just a hard-working employee. He needed to know her story. He stood there, contemplating for a moment longer, his mind racing with thoughts and questions. As much as he had everything he could ever want, there was a part of him that felt an emptiness, a longing for something deeper, something more meaningful. He often found himself surrounded by people who admired his wealth and power, but this moment felt different. This woman, asleep at her desk, showed him something he had never truly seen before: vulnerability, humanity, and a deeper connection that transcended status and appearance. The CEO's gaze lingered on her for just a few more seconds, and then, realizing the late hour, he decided to leave. But the image of her sleeping at her desk remained with him. He couldn't shake the feeling that there was something important about this encounter. The spark of interest he felt for this woman was undeniable, and he couldn't help but think that maybe, just maybe, this was the beginning of something completely unexpected. As the CEO walked away, he glanced back once more, his curiosity turning into a newfound fascination. Little did either of them know that this seemingly insignificant moment, the act of a woman simply sleeping at work, would be the catalyst for a romance that neither of them could have predicted. It was the first step in a journey that would challenge their beliefs, change their lives, and redefine what it meant to truly connect with someone. In the days that followed the CEO's unexpected encounter with the young woman asleep at her desk, his mind couldn't stop returning to the image of her. It wasn't just her vulnerability that struck him. It was a quiet determination she exuded even in her exhaustion. The more he thought about it, the more curious he became about her. Who was she? What drove her to work so relentlessly? What did she aspire to? And most of all, why had this simple moment of vulnerability left such an impression on him? The CEO was no stranger to powerful connections. In the business world, he had forged alliances with some of the most influential people in the industry, all based on mutual interests, shared goals, and often the promise of profit. But what he felt now was something entirely different. It was an emotional curiosity that didn't have a clear path to business advantage or personal gain. He found himself wanting to know more about her, not because of what she could offer him professionally, but because of the quiet strength she seemed to embody. In a world of polished suits, lavish parties, and constant competition, this young woman stood out for her humility and commitment. It was strange, really. He was a millionaire, a successful businessman who had everything: money, power, influence. And yet this woman, a simple employee working long hours in a corporate office, had stirred something within him. It wasn't something he could explain or even understand fully. But every time he thought about her, his curiosity deepened, and he found himself looking for ways to learn more about her. He couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to her than just her late-night shifts and her exhausted demeanor. He had seen it before. The way people tried to present a perfect image, the masks they wore to fit into the corporate world. But with her, there was an authenticity, a rawness, that made him want to know the person behind the hard-working employee. So, the CEO found himself observing her more closely in the following days. It was subtle at first. He made sure to stop by the office again, though not for any specific reason. Each time he visited, he would glance over at her desk, watching her work diligently, her face focused and determined. She would often stay late, long after the office had emptied out, typing away at her computer, her brow furrowed in concentration. He noticed the small details, the way she always took the extra time to make sure her work was done perfection, the way she never seemed to complain, even when the workload seemed overwhelming. There was a quiet resilience about her that intrigued him. One evening, he decided to take a more direct approach. It wasn't unusual for him to leave notes or messages for employees when he had feedback or questions, so he thought it might be an appropriate way to break the ice. The next time he was in the office, he noticed she was still there, working late as usual. He saw an opportunity to connect, and with that thought, he took a deep breath and scribbled a short note. He left it on her desk, hidden beneath a pile of papers, just within her line of sight. It was simple but to the point. Great job on the recent project. Your dedication hasn't gone unnoticed. Keep it up. He didn't expect a response right away, but he did hope that it would catch her attention. The note was intended to be a small acknowledgement, a simple gesture to show that someone noticed the hard work she put in, even if it wasn't directly tied to a specific project or task. The CEO knew that sometimes a little recognition could go a long way. He had been on the receiving end of a few well-placed compliments in his time, and he knew how impactful they could be, especially when they came from an unexpected source. The next day, as he passed by her desk, he saw that the note had been moved. It was no longer tucked beneath the papers, but now sitting on top of her desk, a small smiley face drawn at the bottom. There was no message in return, but the subtle change in the way she had responded made him smile. It was a small victory in his mind, a sign that she had noticed the gesture. He didn't want to overthink it, but there was something about the way she had placed it front and center that felt like a silent acknowledgement, a recognition of the gesture. Over the next few weeks, the CEO continued to make small, subtle attempts to connect with her. Sometimes, he would leave a brief comment in passing, telling her how impressed he was with her work ethic. Other times, he would stop by her desk, making small talk about the latest projects or asking for her opinion on something business-related. He was careful not to cross any boundaries, but he enjoyed these small exchanges. They weren't about business. They were about learning more about her, about seeing her as a person rather than just an employee. It became clear to him that she wasn't the type of person to ask for attention or praise. She worked quietly, keeping her head down and focusing on her tasks. She wasn't interested in showing off or seeking recognition, and that was precisely what drew him to her. In a world where so many people were eager to be noticed or admired, she stood out for her quiet humility. He admired her for it. She had an inner strength, a self-assurance that didn't require validation from others. That was a rare quality, especially in a world as competitive as theirs. As time went on, the CEO began to notice how their interactions were becoming more natural. The first few conversations had been awkward, small, and somewhat hesitant, but now they were more fluid. He would ask her opinion on a project, and she would give him thoughtful, insightful answers. Her voice was soft, but there was a confidence in it, a clear understanding of what she was talking about. She had a sharp mind and a way of seeing things that others often missed. He found himself valuing her perspective, seeking her advice more often. In turn, she seemed to start opening up to him more as well. Though she still remained professional and guarded, there was a subtle warmth that began to develop between them. Her responses became more engaging, and the small smiles she offered when her eyes met were warmer, more genuine. There was a certain comfort between them that wasn't there before, a mutual respect that began to form with each passing day. He could see her passion for her work, and he could feel that she was beginning to trust him. They weren't quite friends yet, but there was a budding connection, one that was built on small gestures, subtle exchanges, and the growing understanding that they saw something in each other beyond the surface. It wasn't about status or wealth. It was about the human connection that had formed so unexpectedly between them. And as the CEO continued to watch her, it became more and more clear to him that this was something different. He had felt this kind of curiosity before, but never quite like this. In the quiet, unspoken moments between them, he realized that what had started as simple intrigue was beginning to develop into something more, something that might change everything. As the days turned into weeks, the CEO found himself not just observing the young woman at her desk, but genuinely wanting to know more about her. Her dedication and quiet determination had drawn him in, but it was her spirit, her inner strength, that made him truly curious. Beneath the surface of her professional demeanor, there was a complexity to her that he hadn't yet uncovered, and he felt a strong urge to understand what had shaped her into the person she was today. He decided to take a more direct approach, and finally asked her to join him for a brief meeting. Something casual, just to talk about the projects they were working on. He wanted to give her the opportunity to speak up, to share her thoughts and ideas, something he knew would be valuable, given the insights he had witnessed in their short conversations. But at the same time, he was hoping that this meeting might also offer a chance for them to connect on a more personal level. When the day came, they met in a small conference room, away from the rest of the office. The atmosphere was different from the usual professional encounters they had. This was more intimate, more relaxed. As they sat across from each other, he could tell she was slightly nervous, unsure of how to behave. She was so used to being focused and professional, and it was clear she hadn't expected a casual conversation with her boss. After talking shop for a while, discussing work projects and upcoming deadlines, the CEO decided to shift the conversation. He asked her about her life outside of work, something personal. At first, she hesitated, caught off guard by the question. She wasn't used to talking about herself in such a vulnerable way. It was easier for her to focus on work, on the tasks at hand, but here was someone in power, someone who could easily ignore her, asking about her, genuinely interested. She took a deep breath, gathering her thoughts, before she opened up just a little. She told him that, like many people, she had always been ambitious. She had grown up in a modest household, where every penny counted. Her parents had worked hard to give her the best education they could afford, and she had always felt the weight of their sacrifices. That pressure had shaped her work ethic. She had always believed that success was earned, not given, and she wasn't the type to sit back and wait for things to come to her. Her parents' sacrifices meant everything to her, and she knew that if she wanted to honor them, she had to work harder than anyone else. Her voice grew quieter as she spoke, a faint trace of emotion creeping in as she recounted how she had put her heart and soul into her studies and her career. She had always been the overachiever, the one who stayed late at work, the one who never stopped pushing herself. But it hadn't been easy. She had faced countless challenges along the way, balancing work and school, dealing with the pressures of perfection, and struggling to maintain relationships outside of work. She admitted that sometimes it felt like she was giving up so much of herself just to stay on top, and at times she wondered if it was all worth it. For a moment, there was a silence in the room as the CEO processed what she had said. There was so much more to her than he had initially realized. The young woman who had seemed so composed, so determined in the office, had been carrying with her an entire lifetime of responsibility and sacrifice. He hadn't known the full extent of her struggles, but hearing her talk about them gave him a new level of respect for her. It wasn't just her work ethic that impressed him. It was her resilience in the face of adversity, the way she had fought to get to where she was today. As she spoke, the CEO found himself wanting to listen more, to learn more. He felt drawn to her in a way he hadn't expected. Her vulnerability was something he hadn't seen in anyone in a long time, certainly not in the polished business world he inhabited. He realized that, in her own way, she had been as focused on keeping up appearances as he had, though her mask was built of sheer determination, not wealth and success. And then, just as he was about to respond, she surprised him by asking about his own life. It was the first time she had expressed any real curiosity about him, and it caught him off guard. In that moment, she showed a side of herself that he hadn't seen before, the side of her that cared, that was willing to open up and be vulnerable. It was a shift, a softening. She wasn't just a hardworking employee anymore. She was a person with real emotions, real dreams, and fears. In that quiet space, they both began to share more than just professional thoughts. They began to talk about their lives outside the office, his struggles with being constantly surrounded by people who only wanted something from him, her desire to break free from the constant pressure of being perfect. The conversation moved from professional details to personal reflections, and for the first time, they were connecting as human beings, not just as boss and employee. There was something beautiful in that moment, something raw and unspoken. They were both vulnerable, both revealing pieces of themselves they didn't usually show to anyone. The CEO had always been guarded, preferring to keep his personal life private, but he found himself sharing more than he usually did. For once, he didn't feel like he had to keep up the facade. The woman across from him, despite her own struggles, had a way of making him feel at ease. She wasn't looking to take anything from him. She was simply being honest, and that honesty felt like a breath of fresh air. The conversation continued for a while longer, but it felt like time stood still. They weren't talking about work, about business, or about goals. They were simply sharing their experiences, their vulnerabilities. And in doing so, they were creating a connection that went beyond the office walls. It was clear to both of them that something was beginning to shift, something deeper than either of them had expected. Their bond was growing, rooted in mutual respect, shared understanding, and emotional openness that neither of them had anticipated. As they wrapped up their conversation, the CEO felt a sense of clarity he hadn't experienced before. He realized that, beyond the ambitious woman he had first noticed working tirelessly at her desk, there was a person with dreams, fears, and a quiet strength that had only just begun to reveal itself. And for her part, she realized that maybe, just maybe, there was more to him than the successful businessman who ran the company. Perhaps, beneath the surface, there was someone who truly understood what it meant to work hard and the struggle, someone who could see her, not just the image she projected. As the connection between the CEO and the young woman deepened, it quickly became clear that their growing relationship would not be without its challenges. What had started as an innocent curiosity, a shared respect for each other's hard work, soon turned into something much more complicated, something neither of them had planned for. They both found themselves at a crossroads where personal feelings began to conflict with their professional roles. The obstacles they would face, both external and internal, would test not only their growing connection, but also their professional integrity and personal desires. It didn't take long for the first external obstacle to emerge: company politics. As the CEO and the young woman became more acquainted, their interactions started to be noticed by others. In a corporate environment where appearances and power dynamics were everything, the subtle, seemingly innocent moments of connection between a boss and an employee soon raised eyebrows. Their conversations, initially casual and professional, became the subject of whispered discussions in the hallways and behind closed doors. Some of the more senior executives, who had long been vying for the CEO's attention and approval, started to take notice of the attention he was giving to the young woman. Rumors began to spread, and it wasn't long before they reached the ears of the HR department. There were concerns about favoritism and the potential conflicts of interest that could arise if the CEO was seen as too personally invested in one of his employees. The young woman, though unaware of the full extent of rumors, could feel the shift in the office atmosphere. Colleagues who once seemed supportive began to distance themselves, and she noticed a coldness in the way some people interacted with her. Even her closest friends at the company seemed to look at her differently. The CEO, on the other hand, had begun to feel the pressure from all sides. His decisions were constantly scrutinized, and now, even the smallest gesture toward the young woman was being interpreted with suspicion. He wasn't used to this kind of attention, particularly when it had nothing to do with his business acumen. He had always prided himself on being a professional, and now his personal life was intruding on that image. He started to question how far he should let the relationship develop. Was it worth jeopardizing his reputation and the company's stability for the sake of his feelings? As the external pressures mounted, the CEO found himself being pulled in different directions. He had to contend with the potential fallout from the higher-ups, some of whom were already questioning his leadership and decision-making. They wondered whether the personal relationship was clouding his judgment. He began to receive subtle hints from colleagues, reminding him of the importance of maintaining professional boundaries. The last thing he wanted was for his personal life to interfere with his ability to lead the company effectively. The more he thought about it, the more he realized how complicated the situation had become. While external pressures were certainly mounting, the internal struggles both the CEO and the young woman faced were even more intense. As much as they were drawn to each other, they each had personal fears and insecurities that made the situation even more difficult to navigate. The CEO, with all his wealth and success, had always been in control. He was used to having his emotions in check, to keeping his private life hidden from the public eye. But with the young woman, he felt something he had never felt before: vulnerability. For the first time in years, he wasn't sure of his next move. He didn't want to lose the connection they had started to build, but he knew that pursuing a relationship would come with consequences that neither of them could predict. He couldn't ignore the nagging doubts in the back of his mind. Was he genuinely falling for her, or was this just a passing infatuation? She was young, ambitious, and hardworking. But did she see him for who he truly was, or was she simply attracted to his status and power? The more time he spent with her, the more these questions plagued him. He didn't want to be another man in her life who took advantage of her ambition, who used his position to get closer to her. He wondered whether her feelings for him were genuine or simply a result of the attention he had started giving her. His internal conflict grew as he grappled with these questions. The idea that their relationship could be based on something less than mutual affection was a thought he couldn't easily shake. For the young woman, her internal struggles were just as intense. She had always been a driven, focused individual, someone who had worked tirelessly to get where she was. But now, as her feelings for the CEO deepened, she began to question her own motivations. She knew that getting involved with him could change everything, both professionally and personally. Was it worth risking her career, her hard-earned position, for the chance at a romantic relationship? She had always prided herself on her independence, and the thought of relying on someone, especially someone in a position of such power, left her feeling uneasy. Moreover, the attention they were receiving from others in the office made her question whether the relationship was even possible. Was she prepared to face the judgment of her colleagues, the whispers behind her back, and the professional fallout that could come from a personal relationship with the CEO? As much as she wanted to be with him, she couldn't shake the fear that it would end badly, that she would lose her job, or worse, lose the respect of the people she had worked so hard to impress. The young woman also began to question her own feelings. Was she really falling for the CEO, or was she simply drawn to the idea of success and prestige that came with being with someone like him? She had always been careful not to let her emotions get in the way of her career. But now, as her feelings for him grew stronger, she found it harder to separate the personal from the professional. The constant push and pull between these two worlds left her feeling confused and torn. As the tension between them grew, they each found themselves questioning what they wanted. The internal and external pressures, along with their own insecurities, made the idea of pursuing a relationship feel increasingly complicated. They both wondered whether it was even possible to maintain their bond without the looming consequences threatening to tear them apart. In the face of these challenges, they found themselves at a crossroads. Their growing attraction to each other was undeniable, but the weight of the obstacles they were facing, both outside forces and their own internal conflicts, made them question whether it was worth continuing down this path. Would the potential for happiness outweigh the risks, or would they ultimately be forced to walk away from what they had started? The uncertainty hung in the air, and neither of them knew where their relationship would lead next. As the external and internal pressures mounted, it became evident that both the CEO and the young woman could no longer ignore the growing bond between them. Their attraction to each other was undeniable, But the complications surrounding their professional roles and the judgment they faced from others made it difficult for either of them to fully embrace their feelings. Despite the tension, the connection between them had continued to grow stronger with each passing day. It was clear that something had to give, and soon. One late evening, after yet another long day of work, the CEO found himself in the office later than usual. The building was quiet, most of the employees having left for the day, but he couldn't shake the feeling that something important needed to be said. He had spent the entire week wrestling with his emotions, trying to keep his distance, maintaining the professional boundary that was expected of him. But every time he saw her, every time he interacted with her, his feelings only deepened. She had become more than just an employee to him. She had become someone he couldn't stop thinking about. As he walked down the hallway, he noticed her desk at the far end of the office. She was sitting there, her face illuminated by the soft glow of the desk lamp. Her focus was fixed on her computer screen, her fingers flying over the keys as she worked, oblivious to the quiet around her. For a moment, he stood in the doorway, watching her, feeling both admiration and a deep sense of longing. He had always appreciated her work ethic, her dedication, and the way she approached everything with such passion. But now it was more than that. He felt drawn to her in a way he couldn't ignore anymore. He approached her desk cautiously, the sound of his footsteps echoing in the silence. She looked up, startled to see him standing there. For a moment, their eyes met, and it felt like the world outside of that office had disappeared. Neither of them said anything at first. There was just an unspoken understanding between them, a recognition that something had changed. He cleared his throat, trying to find his voice. "I thought we should talk," he said, his voice steady but with a hint of uncertainty. She looked at him with a mixture of surprise and apprehension. "About what?" He hesitated, feeling the weight of the moment. This wasn't just about business. It wasn't just about office politics or professional boundaries anymore. This was about something deeper, something personal. And it was something he couldn't keep buried any longer. He sat down across from her, his eyes searching hers for any sign that she might feel the same way. "I've been thinking a lot about us," he began, his words coming out slowly. "And I know we've both been hesitant to let things go too far. There's so much at stake. I know that, but I can't ignore how I feel about you. I can't keep pretending like this is just some professional relationship." Her breath caught in her throat, and for a moment, she said nothing. She had known that something was growing between them, but hearing him say it out loud made it all the more real. She had spent so much time trying to suppress her own feelings, trying to focus on her work and avoid the distractions that came with getting involved with someone in such a powerful position. But deep down, she couldn't deny that she had been drawn to him, too. She had been resisting it, afraid of the consequences. But now, with him sitting there, opening up to her, it was impossible to ignore any more. "I don't know what to say," she whispered, her voice soft. "I've been thinking about it, too. About us." She paused, her gaze dropping to the desk, as if she were searching for the right words. "I've always told myself that work comes first, that my career is the most important thing. And I've worked so hard to get to where I am. I don't want to lose that, especially not because of something personal." He reached across the desk, gently lifting her chin with his hand, so that she would meet his eyes. "I understand. Believe me, I do. I've spent so much of my life focusing on the company, on building my career, that I've pushed away anything that could complicate that. But the truth is, I can't keep pretending that what we have, doesn't matter. I've tried, but every time I see you, every time we talk, I feel something more, and I can't ignore it anymore. I don't want to." She swallowed hard, her heart racing in her chest. The intensity in his eyes was overwhelming. She had known for some time now that there was something there, but hearing him admit it, confessing his feelings, was something she hadn't expected. It was raw, honest, and completely unexpected. But at the same time, it felt right. She couldn't deny any longer, and despite her fears and the risks involved, she realized that she wanted this, too. She wanted him, not just as a colleague, not just as a CEO, but as someone who saw her for who she truly was. I feel the same way," she said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've been trying so hard to fight it, to stay focused on my work. But every time I'm around you, I can't stop thinking about what it would be like if we didn't have to pretend. If we could just be honest with each other." He smiled, a small but genuine smile that softened the tension in the room. He could see the relief in her eyes, the way she seemed to let go of the burden she had been carrying for so long. It was a turning point for both of them, an acknowledgement that they could no longer live in the space of uncertainty. They had crossed a line, one that could change everything, and yet, in this moment, it felt right. "I'm not saying it's going to be easy," he said, his voice firm but gentle. "There are still risks, complications, things we can't control. But I don't want to pretend anymore. I want to see where this goes, no matter what happens." She nodded, feeling a sense of calm settle over her. For the first time in a long while, she felt like she was making the right choice, even if it was a difficult one. The future was uncertain, and the road ahead would undoubtedly be filled with challenges. But she was willing to take that step. For him, for them. "I'm with you," she said, her voice steady now. "I'm willing to take that risk." In that moment, something shifted. The unspoken tension between them that had existed for so long finally broke, and the weight of their feelings, which had been simmering beneath the surface, was released. They had both confronted their fears and taken the bold step to be honest with each other. It was a beginning of something new, something that would change the course of their lives and their relationship forever. The aftermath of their honest conversation marked the beginning of a new chapter for both the CEO and the young woman. It wasn't easy, and there were moments of doubt, but they were determined to navigate the challenges together. They had crossed a line that could not be undone, and now they had to face the consequences of their actions. But rather than let fear or the opinions of others dictate their future, they chose to lean into their connection, building a relationship grounded in trust, understanding, and mutual respect. In the weeks that followed, the CEO and the young woman carefully and cautiously worked to balance their personal and professional lives. At first, it was difficult. The office, which had once felt like a neutral space, now felt like an arena where every move they made was under scrutiny. Colleagues who had once been warm and supportive now whispered behind closed doors. The rumors continued to circulate, and every decision made by the CEO was scrutinized even more than before. Yet, despite these pressures, the couple remained resolute in their decision to pursue their relationship. The CEO, once guarded and focused only on business, began to prioritize their connection. He made sure to show his support for her, both in the office and outside it. He was more than just a mentor or a boss to her now. He was her partner, someone who understood her struggles, her dreams, and her passion. It wasn't just about navigating office politics. It was about proving to each other that they could rise above the judgment and make their relationship work. They spent time outside the office, away from prying eyes, finding moments of peace in each other's company. Whether it was a quiet dinner at a small restaurant or a weekend getaway to get away from the stress of work, they found solace in each other. Slowly but surely, they learned to trust each other more, to lean on each other when the world outside seemed overwhelming. It was these small moments of connection, free from the outside noise, that helped them grow closer. She, too, began to find comfort in the new dynamic. The young woman had always been the one to put work first, always prioritizing her career and goals. But now, with the CEO's support, she felt like she could balance her professional ambitions with her personal life. She no longer felt like she had to do everything alone. With him by her side, she felt empowered to take risks, to step outside of her comfort zone, and to embrace new opportunities both personally and professionally. They began to share their thoughts and fears more openly. She told him about her insecurities, the fear that people would think she was only with him because of his status or wealth. He reassured her time and time again that it was never about that. He valued her for who she was, not for the position she held in the company or her role as his employee. She saw in him the same vulnerability, the same fear of being judged that she had often felt herself. It was a powerful realization for both of them. They weren't alone in their struggles, and together they could face anything. The couple also knew that there would still be challenges ahead. While they had begun to carve out a new space for their relationship, it was clear that navigating their professional roles and maintaining their personal bond would require constant effort. The CEO, for example, had to ensure that his leadership in the company remained uncompromised. There were still executives in the company who questioned his judgment, and he had to remain professional in his decisions to prove that his personal life wouldn't affect his ability to lead. The young woman, too, had to learn to balance her new relationship with her career aspirations. She didn't want to be defined solely by her relationship with the CEO, and she worked hard to continue proving her worth within the company. But despite the hurdles, they grew stronger together. They supported each other when things were tough, celebrated each other's victories, and constantly communicated to ensure they were both on the same page. Trust became the foundation of their relationship. Trust that they would always have each other's back, no matter what. As time passed, the couple's bond only deepened. The whispers in the office gradually died down as their commitment to each other became more evident. The CEO and the young woman had proven to everyone, and most importantly to themselves, that their relationship was real, built on more than just physical attraction or office dynamics. They were partners in every sense of the word, facing the world together, navigating complexities of work and life with mutual respect and love. One evening, as they walked out of the office together, hand in hand, they stopped on the sidewalk. The city buzzed around them, but in that moment, it was just the two of them, free from pressures of work, free from judgment, free from expectations. He looked at her, his eyes soft with affection, and for the first time in a long time, he felt a deep sense of peace. It had been a long journey, one filled with uncertainty and challenges, but standing there with her, he knew that everything had been worth it. "You know," he said, his voice steady but filled with warmth, "I never thought I'd be in this position, where I have someone like you by my side, supporting me and letting me be vulnerable with you. I'm so grateful." She smiled, her heart full. "And I never thought I'd find someone who truly sees me for who I am, beyond the work I do. You've shown me that there's more to life than just ambition and success. You've made me realize that it's okay to let my guard down sometimes." With a smile, he gently cupped her face, lifting her chin to kiss her forehead. "I'm glad we found each other," he whispered. Their future together seemed brighter than ever. The challenges they had faced had only strengthened their bond, and they had learned how to support each other through the ups and downs of life and work. They had gone through the hardest part, facing their feelings, breaking down the walls of professionalism that had kept them apart, and embracing something more meaningful. They had learned that love could flourish even in the most unexpected places, and that with the right person by your side, anything was possible. And as they walked off into the night, hand in hand, it was clear to both of them that this was just the beginning of their happily ever after. The world ahead was theirs to face, together, with love, trust, and an unbreakable connection that would guide them every step of the way. What do you think about this story? Can love really grow from the most unexpected circumstances? We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. How do you think relationships in the workplace should be handled, especially when both personal and professional boundaries are tested? If this story resonated with you, don't forget to hit the like button and share it with friends who might enjoy it too. And for more captivating stories, unexpected moments, and inspiring journeys, make sure to subscribe to our channel. We're here to bring you the most engaging content that'll keep you hooked and coming back for more. So, go ahead, leave your thoughts in the comments, and join our community by subscribing. Thanks for watching, and stay tuned for more.